All right. Hello, everyone. It's Jason Fierno with the Mining Mavericks. The Mining Mavericks are a curated group of industry leaders who are passionate about making the industry better and more sustainable for everyone. Today, I'm excited to be joined here by Gus Minor. Gus, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jason.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to jumping into it with you here. Before I do, real quick, just to give our audience a sense of who you are. You've got 20 years of experience and over 20 years of experience in technology and nearly a decade or so in mining and metals. You've worked for companies such as ServuNet Computer and Network Services, Technica Mining, and Hardwired Physiques, which I think we might have to jump into a little bit. But anything else you want to add for context for people?
No, I mean, I think that's good. I mean, I've got a range of experience from technology to marketing to mining, getting onto tools to back to technology. So, and a whole bunch of stuff in between. So it's been a wild ride, and I like living life like a highlight reel. So looking forward to the conversation.
I love it, man. I love that attitude. And you're currently the Chief Innovation Officer at Sophie.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that. I think I'd be interested to hear what you guys are up to there.
Yeah, I mean, Sophie, we've got a pretty big goal as an organization, which is to just take world-class safety systems that the mining industry have adopted, and giving it the opportunity to step it up a notch. I've had, my family has had some fatalities that we've had to deal with in the mining industry, and it's something that anybody that's close to the sector have been touched with at some point. And as much of a great job as we try to do, it's still paper-based, it's still slow, it's still very inefficient. Yet it's considered to be world-class. So we said, you know what, let's take this thing and kick it up a notch and get things where we can empower people to make the right decisions on a daily basis, and just really work on getting the scheduling right, getting the planning right, having people be more hazard and risk smart, so that they can be a lot more proactive rather than being told to. And yeah, so even when it comes down to just the name Sophie, right? It all came down from the Greek goddess of wisdom and knowledge. Which is the SOF, as well as software, because we are a software tool that flows information to help save a life. And V is life in French, right? So that's where Sophie came about as far as a branding perspective and a mission. So it really helps us keep ourselves aligned on why we're doing what we're doing. And yeah, so it's really exciting work. Really exciting work to enable the workforce to be what they want to be on a daily basis, and to go home to their families every day.
Yeah, I love that. I love the passion behind it too. And you touched on it briefly, and you and I have talked about this before, but there, as you mentioned, were impacts, to your family that are close to home. And I think that passion comes through in your tone, but also in your work. So thank you for sharing that with us here today. What would you say, in your opinion, is the biggest obstacle that people have, adopting the type of systems that you can deploy?
That's something that we've been challenging for quite a while. And where we think the obstacles are not where they are. And I think that's where the biggest obstacle is.
Okay.
The number one thing right from when we started our mission is that, you're never going to get the entire workforce using a software system. Like, these are miners, they're rough and tough and they're macho, and, they're just going to do what they're going to do. And then you're not going to put a phone or a tablet in their hands to do their work. And what we found was it was the complete opposite. Everybody wants to succeed at the end of the day, everybody, right? And if you give them a tool that it helps them and enables them to ensure even better success, they're all in. And one of the things that blindsides a lot of the workforce is just a lack of information. Okay. So now you give them all the information you have, from like a prints to manuals to policies and procedures to pictures and diagrams, like whatever the heck, whatever it is that you want to put in their hands, they're all in. Where the biggest obstacle that I've found in adoption so far has been mostly on the management side, right? Where it's a big project. There's a lot of things to change, right? So change management, as well as moving the goalpost. So now you've got a new goalpost that you have to establish and hold people accountable to it. Otherwise the project, you know, kind of strays apart. So that's where we have the conversation, say, you know what, when it comes to building a tool that satisfies the workforce, don't worry about it. We got that covered. Now let's get the conversation right to make sure that that everybody's in as a team, and you move forward. What we've heard from, you know, a lot of times and over the years, I'm sure you've seen it before, where the workforce gets a little bit disgruntled when they feel unheard. And you know, they're asking for tools, they're asking for support, they're asking for the help they need to succeed, and it's not always delivered. Well, now they've got a tool in their hands that's, you know, ready and willing to listen, as long as the leadership is ready and willing to deliver when the messages come across. And that, to me, is probably where the biggest obstacle is that transition, that shift in mindset, where you need to be the enablers. You know, as a leader, you need to enable and just get out of the way, right, so to speak.
And that it just doesn't happen, huh? Or it's a challenge anyway.
Well, it's change, right? It's change. So
it makes me think of something that one of my mentors said a long time ago, is that anytime you're in a position where you're trying to change either the culture or the process, you know, it's what he felt was that it could be a career ender if you didn't do it with kid gloves, you know, because people don't like to change, which is very true. It's very, very true.
Yeah, and it's wild, right? Because change is something that we experience every day as a human being. Our bodies are changing, our hormones are changing, we're getting older, you know, we're never getting younger. You know, we're developing families, we go from home to home. Like, change is just part of our everyday. Yet when it comes to work, we want it to be static. We want it to be consistent. We want to know what the definition of success is, so you can hang your hat at the end of the day and be proud of it. So changing that goalpost is for sure one of those big things that when it comes to work anyways, because you know, you're changing the definition of success, and then all of a sudden it's, well, how is this going to affect my livelihood? How do I make sure that I can still provide for my family? And, you know, it's taking the language of failure out of those movements, and just don't worry about it. You know, just start at the beginning. And then the biggest comparison that I've had to that is, you know, when weightlifting, because I've got quite a bit of a background in weightlifting, is if you manage to put on a pound a week, right, on the bar, man, at the end of the year, you've got a couple 100 pounds, or, you know, 150 pounds that you're dealing with, or more, which, you know, when you look at from that standpoint, saying, hey, in January, I was lifting 100 pounds. Now the next January, you're lifting 200 pounds or more. It's a massive change, but it was only 1 pound a week. Right. So it's to have those conversations, say, like, I know it's a big tool, it's a big shift, but just start with the small stuff, and then the rest comes with it.
Pound a week. Yep. That would be tough. So tell me about weightlifting. Olympic weightlifting, or what kind of weightlifting?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've done quite a few different sports, you know, I've been weightlifting since I'm 12 years old, mostly because, you know, I wanted to pursue some hockey. Then I did some football. Then I did some boxing. Then I did some motocross racing. Like, you know, there was always a reason to lift weights to just be in better shape.
Sure.
And what ended up happening is my body just really took well to it, and then all the sports that I loved I couldn't do anymore, because I just kind of outgrew my equipment, outgrew the sport a little bit, you know, especially golf, that kind of got clumsy. But yeah, so I got into strongman. So I did quite a few years in strongman competitions all over, you know, Canada, US, and beyond. Once I got, you know, through that, I got into the bodybuilding, where I got, you know, to the national level in bodybuilding. My wife ended up getting her pro card, her IFBB pro card as well, in bodybuilding. And that's what led us to, you know, start Hardwired Physiques, is that we were actually able to coach and mentor other aspiring athletes to get to their goals from a physicality standpoint, right? So
Yeah, I want to. That's really cool. So I'm super interested. I'm super weak too, but so I might not be the best guy to talk about this, but I'm interested in that venture, the hardwire physiques. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. So while I was going through my mining career and, spending more time in the gym and spending time doing strongman and bodybuilding, it just became a huge passion of mine as far as getting the diet dialed, getting the mindset dialed, the mindset of a champion. If you don't feel like you're going to win, the journey is just painful, right?
Mm,
So you got to get yourself ready. And like I said, like, by having a lot of mentors along the way as well, in that realm, I was able to recycle a lot of information that I've gained along the way, as well as all the knowledge that I read from the different books and courses that we took. And we just kind of found a sweet spot as far as how to accomplish your goals, whether it's 9 weeks, 9 months, 9 years.
mm,
There's incremental ways to get there without crashing anything down or going too extreme, or eliminating any food. So that was my thing, is that a lot of the coaches that we dealt with is like, eliminate this and eliminate that. Well, then when you do bring it back, you kind of struggle there. So we did a lot of work where we tried to eliminate nothing but just practice moderation and
mm.
control. And yeah, we did really well. So we coached, between my wife and I, we coached a little over 200-300 athletes over the span of the years. And yeah, it's just a really fun thing to do, as a side business, to just help people achieve their goals. That's outside of technology and outside of mining and outside of the things that we do on a daily basis. So
I think that's, first of all, that's really cool and good for you guys. Congratulations to her for getting her card. I think that's impressive. I also feel strongly that in order to be as successful as you can be as a professional, there's a certain aspect of balance with your mindset and your health, fitness and all of that. I look at it in terms of creating capacity, so that it's, what can I do? What can I accomplish? And if I didn't exercise, consistently, there's no way I would be able to perform at the same level from a business standpoint. I'm assuming that you share the same perspective, but how would
it's
you say it?
exactly it's exactly the same. I mean, I whenever in life things started clicking really well for me, you go to like 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, 10 months, a year, where sometimes like you can do no wrong. Things are just
Mm,
clicking, right?
mhm,
Work is awesome, family is awesome, like everything is going well. Were usually the months and the time frames where I was at my physical best, right? I'm sleeping well, my diet's on point, I'm training really well, and everything followed suit. And then as soon as as soon as things started kind of shifting there, and that
mhm.
discipline slips, for that balance, then your sleep's not as good, so you're not as focused during the day. You're kind of sluggish because your body's kind of going through changes. And we sometimes don't take for account how diet affects our hormones, and
Mm.
it affects it so much. And that drives everything. I mean, your internal balance drives everything, right? So I'm with you on that one. With a really good healthy balance, everything will follow suit.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well said too. I'm actually gonna, if you're okay, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of value for people to have some expert advice, and I put you as an expert based on the credentials that you just laid out for me. So, what would be some diet tips and tricks, or how do you, like, I look at food as fuel, and that mentality of food as fuel has served me well. But how do you think about fueling your body and providing food?
Well,
Or what would you tell people? Like, what are some of the common mistakes, maybe?
well, the first part is that, food, sometimes we kind of lean into it for comfort.
Hmm.
And as much as it does play a role, and you do need to allow room for that, on a weekly basis, it just can't be your sole purpose to eat, right?
Mm.
You can't just always eat because it tastes good or it feels good, because most of the time you just consumed what you thought would make you feel better, and then you just feel worse, and then it really didn't help anything at all. So we just say, like, no different than when you provide your vehicle, the right gas, the
Mm.
right octane, the right oil for the engine. If you don't do those things, the whole thing falls apart, and the experience with the vehicle is short lived, right? So your body's the same way. Feed it things that'll going to give you longevity. Feed it things that your brain will just absorb, and things that muscles will absorb as much as possible as well. All right, so that way it makes a difference between what's being absorbed for growth or what's being absorbed for waste, right?
Mm.
So
What are some of the things that you enjoy eating that are easy for your brain to digest and your body to digest? Give us an understanding of kind of how you look at it. I mean, some people say this much protein, this many carbs, that kind of stuff. How do you look at it?
I mean, it all depends what the goal is. So if I'm trying to pack on as much muscle, and I spend years trying to do that, and I mean, in a matter of 4 years, I went from 210 pounds to 270 pounds or something like that, in like, competing. In my heaviest, like, when I was competing in strongman, in my heaviest, I was about 335 pounds. I was eating 10,000 plus calories per day. So obviously half of that was probably really good for me, and the rest was just trying to get calories in.
Yep.
So it all depends what the purpose is. Where I'm at now, I'm able to get away with things with, like, 20% protein and 70% carbs and 10%. I like to keep my fats lower, mostly because it's a volume game. You get a lot more volume out of your carbs than you do out of your fats. But yeah, I think as long as you maintain consistency, right? That's where things really start clicking for your body. So you hear about all these diets between, high carb, low fat, high fat, low carb, all protein. They all work. They all work, and they will all succeed. Where the biggest thing is you can't have one day high fat, low carb, and then the next day low carb, high fat, and then all these things. You got to be able to play a consistent game there, and you only see the benefits of what you're doing with your diet, within 30 days, 45 days, where it really starts being a predictable outcome for your body. So yeah, so like right now, I mean, I fly high with carbs right now. There's not a whole lot of protein intake and a whole lot of fat intake, but it's working for me, and it's fast digesting, fast in, fast out. I don't need to be concerned about packing on that much muscle and that much weight. I'm just kind of maintaining. So that's where I'm at. So right now I'm really enjoying, like, these soups and lots of pasta, different types of pasta. Some pastas really don't sit well, so I try to keep the thin pastas to go, but or rices. Like, people tell me, don't you get tired of eating rice and chicken? I'm like, I love it. You just change the sauce and it's a whole new meal. I mean, I eat rice and chicken all the time.
I know, man. I could eat rice, chicken, and broccoli every day. I really could.
Yeah.
That and tacos. I love me some tacos. Can't
yes.
survive without my Mexican food, man, for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. That it was not something that I knew about you. So that's interesting. And you said, if I heard you right, you started 210 and you were all the way up to 330?
Yeah. So
over time.
yeah. when I got into the strongman world, when I graduated from my motocross days, I started getting a little heavier for the bikes. And then I just worked all my way up. So I got to 335 was probably my heaviest when I competed at the Arnold's. I was 335 in Columbus. And then I worked my way down again. So once I got into the bodybuilding segment, on stage at a very low body fat, I was probably like 248 around there. And then I walk around at about 270 now still.
Yeah, no, you're a big kid, man. You got me by 100 pounds for sure. Maybe not quite, but close. But that's interesting. Okay. So that's cool that you can share that with your wife as well. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. She's got a really huge passion for it, and she still does it. She still trains every day she gets up at 6 o'clock and trains and spends time with the kid or the kids. We got 3, and then yeah, we've got a home gym all set up. We've got a whole garage dedicated for it now. So it's fun. It's a family thing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. We don't share the same passion, but we do have a gym at home, and in the garage, one bay dedicated to it with a rack and all that stuff, which is awesome to have. And I remember when COVID hit and all the gyms closed and people couldn't get any of their gear, I was like, oh man, come on over. You can use our stuff. We got it all here. You were like, I can't find anything. I'm like, I know, man. It's so nice having a gym in the garage. So that's really cool. Very, very cool. Okay, well, let's talk about mining because I think that's what we're here to do. So what do you see that we're doing well as an industry within, the environmental health and safety, or maybe health and safety space? I think that's more where you play than in the environmental side. Is that right?
Yeah, it's more health and safety.
Yeah.
And I think, if we really have to highlight it, I think the mining space is really making a really large effort to look at other industries. Starting to look, from outside of the hole that we dig, so to speak, to see what's going on around us. Because other industries are doing some great things, and it's good to capture what's going on there. If you take a look at nuclear and aviation and chemical processing, they all have their the key things they do to keep people safe and to avoid catastrophic events. So there's a lot of that going on. And I find that there's a big momentum shift that's happening in mining where we're caring about people a lot more, not only from like, making sure that people go home safely, but also from attracting new talent, bringing in new talent to the space, like people that would have never considered the mining world before, such as myself. I mean, it wasn't in the cards for me at the beginning. And then I found myself in mining anyways. And it just becomes a lot more appealing when you have a safe, clean, sustainable environment. Even though you're in a fairly dirty area, there's ways to tend to your P's and Q's to have really good housekeeping and good practices in place to attract the talent that you want. And I think that by embracing technology, which the mining space has really been pushing for the past few years, taking on new technologies for new sustainable ways of producing, and reducing that, getting to that net zero that we talk about all the time. It's bringing in talent that are technology centric, and a whole new way of thinking is coming with it, right? Because when you have people that are a little bit more technology focused, processes are just part of the way of thinking, right? It's step number 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and that's how it goes. And because that's what I found where a lot of the breakdowns occur, and it creates the opportunity for an event, right? Is that we have steps 1 through 10 very well laid out, and somehow, some way, we think that we can take out step 4 and step 7 to save time, and get there, and then we're surprised at the outcome, right? It's like, hey, there was a lot of thought and a lot of talented people that got together to decide that it was step 1 through 10. Eliminating those steps will only lead for some shortfall somewhere, right? So I think as an industry, that shift is becoming a lot more apparent, and it's creating a much better stream of risk adversity, right?
Yeah. One shift that I've seen, at least within my career within mining, when I started the company that I worked for, they were awesome. Phelps Dodge. We had a really in-depth induction to mining, and I didn't know it at the time, but they were kind of different than others. And this is 20 years ago, but I was impressed by that. But that was what I was exposed to. And then what I learned as I went out into the industry was that at the time there was a focus on safety, but it was very much based on lag indicators and not necessarily trying to be proactive. But the shift that I've seen over time is that what I see is now people are like, if it's safety related, health and safety related, and it's about keeping people safe and bringing them back to their loved ones every day, like just share the information, share knowledge, share lessons learned, best practices, everything, which I think is excellent. I love it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, and we're using it a lot more now as an efficient way of doing things, rather than a crutch to not do things.
I get it.
Which I find is a good shift within that, what you just said as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's let's embrace it to say, like, you know, there is a cleaner, better, more sustainable way of doing things. And it's not just, well, that's not safe, so I'm just not going to do it, or blame it on safety. That's why we didn't achieve our goals.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with it. The safety and production are like this.
Yeah, have to be.
They have to be.
Yeah, no question. I think it's interesting to think about attracting talent and stuff like that. You know, I have a lot of conversations about the baby boomers that are leaving, the millennials and Gen X's that are kind of now the point of leadership, but then the Gen Z's coming up, you know, their priorities are just different. They're just different. So I think in this space, a lot of effort and energy could be and should be spent, you know, attracting people by showing them how safe we can be.
Yeah, and then, you know what? And one of the things that I've talked about recently was these new generations that have been born with technology in their hands. All they know is speed. Like, it's just how they operate. It's how they process. It's how they do things. So one of the conversations that I had was, you know, it's so hard to get them engaged and working. I'm like, well, yeah, if your workplace is slow and monotonous, they're on their phone doing something else. They're not engaged. They're just not interested in your, you know, in the old way of doing things on the horse and carriage kind of thing, right? So, you know, get on that bandwagon. So, you know, for example, like for our system, using cell phones and tablets and things like that to do the work that needs to get done every day, they're expecting it. They're expecting that's what work looks like for them, and they're demanding it, right? So they're like, hey, you know, fill out, you know, these 10 sheets of paper. Well, one, they could have done it in 60 seconds on the phone. Now you're spending 5-6 minutes doing it on paper. They're just unhooking. So it's not so much that the new generations are not producing at the level of the older ones, is that it's exactly that. They're not producing at that. They're ready to produce at a whole other level that we're just not providing them. Right.
That's interesting. I haven't thought about it in that context. So that's an interesting way to look at it. I was recently having a conversation with Lindsay Schultz, the CEO of MRC Mining Search, you know, and as a recruiting company, she has a lot of conversations with people entering the market. And what she said to me gave me some hope. And that was that the Gen Zs have a recognition and appreciation that their interpersonal skills aren't the same as others, because of exactly what you said. It's all on their phones, on their tablets, the speed stuff. But I was happy and encouraged that there's an awareness of those interpersonal skills, because I think technology can do a lot, but there's not a lot that you can't do with inside of a conversation as well. I don't know what you think about that.
You know, and yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one. And at the same time, is how do you use technology to stimulate the conversation?
I like
right?
it.
And then that's the conversation that we have a lot with the tools that we put together as well, as well, now that everything is on here, you can be documenting something besides someone instead of having a conversation. So no, you're putting it in because that's the way that you're processing it and thinking about it and putting it in. But you can have the conversation about it anyways. So here's an example: is that we lean a lot on positive recognitions and keeping momentum moving forward by having people just acknowledge the good that's happening every day. I mean, we get brought up from an early age where you get a 9 out of 10 in your exam, and then people are like, well, okay, so what happened with the one that you missed? Well, we got 90%. Like, let's move on, right? But it's not how we're brought up. We're brought up with, okay, so what could you have done to get 100%, right? So with that in mind, is that, you know, we bring in new technologies and new ways of being, and it's like, you know what, there's a lot of good things that happen in a workday.
Mm.
And if the last thing that you've had at the end of the day was something about a shortfall or something that you didn't do, that's what you remember coming back the next day,
Mm.
right? Whereas when we leverage the positive recognition model, now you got a really good heartbeat of the organization that gets formed. And a lot of times it becomes the last thing that somebody hears before they go home. It's like golfing and you hit that one shot. It makes you come back, even though you missed 99% of all the other shots. It keeps you coming back. So we've had that conversation with the workforce and supervisors and beyond, where to say, you know what, when we start seeing workers acknowledging each other, workers acknowledging supervision and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
it's no longer like a leadership point. It's a culture, and it keeps them engaged to come back the next day. It's like, yeah, I did bust my hump, and yeah, did this, we did do the best we could, rather than the blame game that we've grown accustomed to, right? Like the F my cross shift that comes up all the time, right? They messed me up. They did it on purpose. Nobody did it on purpose.
Yep.
Nobody did it on purpose. But now you've got the opportunity to offer that context and say, hey, you know what? I know it's less than favorable, but this is what we've done, and this is what we've set up, and this is what we kind of tried to do to get you going. Oh man, thanks for the heads up and thanks for the effort. Now it's a whole positive thing. Even though you got a shortcoming, it's not viewed as a shortcoming. It's viewed as, let's work together to keep the ball moving forward. Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And that's what generates a lot of the conversations, right? In the right way.
So is that part of your process that you teach as you're rolling out, software? Hey, now we have this tool, we've got all the great information. What's the next step in the process? That's to have a conversation. And oh, by the way, let's, keep it positive.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, the first step is we've got a lot of accountability in our tools, because now that we've introduced pictures on everything, it's a game changer, because there's a whole lot of accountability. You can't just say like, oh yeah, well they did this. Well, no, like everybody's taking picture before and after and things like that. So now you get a real true storyline of what's occurring in the field, or your equipment. I've never seen equipment so well maintained. But at the same point, now that the accountability is kind of taken care of, now you can focus on quality of work. And where I found was, during my mining term, was that everything got funneled through one single point of contact between shifts, right? Which is usually the shift supervisor or the foreman.
Right.
And then they're supposed to remember all the details from the 20, 30, 40 people that are working for them and pass it along. And so now that they've got direct streams of communication, the way it was before central blasting, for example, like central blasting did amazing things for safety, but it's separated work groups like you would, by a couple of hours. So now there's no more of that, that cross shift kind of communication and camaraderie. It kind of split apart. So now with our tools is let's bridge that gap again and have them talk to each other. Let's get the whole team, night shift, day shift, afternoons, like get them all working together, so that they can share their knowledge and keep the ball moving forward, which has done amazing for productivity, but even more amazing for culture. And that's what we instill. It says, you know what, it's great to pick up the opportunities as far as like hazards, because the more hazards we pick up, the less incidences we'll keep people safe. But a happy workforce is normally a pretty safe one and a very productive one, right? So it's a big piece.
It's such an important point, though. I think that's often missed, and it's the power of positivity. And there's a book that I recommend to people all the time called Positive Intelligence. And within that book, it gives you all of the statistics around how having a positive outlook improves your health. It improves your relationships. People live longer. I mean, it's not just, I tell this to my kids, it's like, I didn't just pull this out of my butt, guys. I mean, this is actually backed by science. And they look at me like they always do, like I'm nuts, but it's true. It's really, really true. And it's really powerful. I want to share a story with you real quick that I'll keep forever. There's a book by Scott Adams, who's the author of Dilbert. And the book is titled something along the lines of How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, something like that. And in that book, he tells a story about a public speaking event training that he goes to. And the primary rule of this training was that anything and everything you said had to be positive. You couldn't say you screwed that up or why didn't you do this? I mean, it was only positive affirmations, only positive reinforcement. And the story goes that he's at this training and the head trainer asks everybody, at the beginning of this session, it's public speaking, which people hate. Please come up to the stage, give your speech. And the author recounts the story that there's this lady that absolutely sucks. Like, she gets up there, she's sweating, cotton mouth, just freaking out, can't even mumble a word. And everybody's just kind of staring at this lady, as the author describes it, like, what the heck? Like, say something, do something. You can't be that scared. You can't suck that bad, basically, is what the energy was within the room. And after a period of time, the teacher says, you know what, you can go ahead and sit down. But then he comes up to her and he says, you know what, that was courageous. Like, I love the courage that it must have taken you to get up in front of people and do that. Even saying it now, it sends chills through my body because of how powerful I feel that was. And as the story goes, this woman becomes, through the course of time, one of the best speakers in the class. And I thought, man, just that one time a teacher, took the time to find something positive about the scenario and then share it. It was really impactful for me.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it resonates a lot with a lot of things that I talk about on a daily basis with my team and my family. Is the hardest step is your first one. Once you got that first one done, you've got momentum now. Like, go. And if you've got a situation that stops you in your tracks and doesn't allow you to take the second step, so that teacher could have had the opportunity to be like, yeah, okay, well, that's just not her gig, let's keep moving on, and embarrassed her.
Yep.
She would have never taken the step again. So, by saying, like, hey, you know what, that first step was courageous and you kind of nailed it, then the second step was even easier. And then the third step and fourth step. So I love that story as well. Thanks for sharing that, because it resonates a lot.
Yeah, I think it does for me, for sure. But I like the concept you're talking about as the first step, is the hardest. And once you take it, you get the momentum. I totally agree. I mean, I got on my shirt, fail forward every day. You got to take those first steps, and that's how you learn and that's how you grow. And I think that's really significant. So yeah, thanks for that. That's good.
The only way to start is to start.
That's right. That's exactly right. Well, what do you think is the biggest challenge? So you talked about, from an implementation standpoint, the challenges with management and stuff, but what other areas do you see within our industry that, are challenging? Or
Well, you know what? I think for the most part, the gap in generations that exists within the industry right now, there's a big transition that's starting, right? But it's still a challenge. You're either into the 25 plus years into the industry, or you're into the 5 years of the industry, right? There's not a whole lot of in-betweens, I find. And then that poses a challenge. So it'll be interesting to see how we take that on, right? Because there's to your point earlier with the generations, is that there's always a belief that the generations before did it better than the new generations coming up, because they've got all that knowledge and the wisdom that they've earned over the years. So it'll be interesting to see how that knowledge gets transferred, and how the succession occurs, right, to the new realm. And I think it's going to be really positive. I feel a really positive swing within that sense. There's a lot of new thoughts. So I had a conversation with somebody the other day where it said, mining will truly change when a technology company buys a mine.
Okay.
right?
listening. I'm curious.
And then I thought about it, and then it made total sense, because what it would be is they would buy a mine, and then they would operate it not from a miner's perspective, but from, you know, a process perspective and a technology perspective, where now they're just basically doing the zeros and ones about the business, not about, well, we've always done it this way, so let's keep moving forward. It's not going to be about egos anymore. It's just like, hey, what's going to get us to the end result as quickly and as safely as possible with as little downtime as possible. Like when you look at, for example, like for what we're building, we have to provide a 99.999% uptime.
For what did you say? I missed it.
Like as a software provisioner.
Okay. Yep.
There's got to be like a 99.9, like a quadruple 9 uptime promise to your clients. So it's basically like virtually zero downtime.
Right.
Right. And that's the amount of care and attention we have to put on data. Right. Meanwhile, something will occur at a mine and they're down for like a day or two, and nobody thinks about it. Like, oh yeah, well that happened. And then they just keep moving forward. Like, and then somehow they think that time can be rebought. You can't rebuy time. It's gone. Right. So when you take an industry that's been living by the 99 quadruple 9, and that would disrupt another industry that's not living that way, that's when I started thinking, you know what a powerful statement. It's like, you know, you're coming in from left field. Yeah, you're going to have to learn things about the industry, but you got to shake things up, right? You're going to shake things up. So it'll be interesting to see, like, you know, as we remove carbon, as we get to that net zero emissions, as we start transforming the workflows, as we have to start working in the mines with less people, not only because some technologies are being introduced that'll displace some people, but there's just no people. There's just no power. There's no human resources available to do the work. It's going to be like, one, how do you attract those human resources? Two, how do you make them as efficient as possible and keeping them safe and getting home? And the only way to find sustainability is to have zero harm. It's just the only way to be sustainable in the future. So it'll be interesting to see how that transition occurs from, you know, these are the lessons we've learned and this is how we've operated for the past 30 years. And that's just how we're going to continue operating because that's what we know best, to, yeah, I got what you're saying. Now let's try this way. It's going to be pretty cool how that transitions.
It's such a good point. And before we hit record, you mentioned, you know, having similar conversations with people and things coming back to a single point or a particular topic. And the idea that we're talking about now with the next generation of workforce is something that comes up all the time. However, I don't see a lot of people that seem to care or are doing anything about it. So do you see a leader or leaders in that space that are really putting resources toward that goal of attracting talent and maybe changing the perception of mining?
You know, I've seen a lot of different initiatives so far by a lot of different groups.
Okay.
I think the contracting space probably going to be the ones that are going to break through here and show how it's done. The mining world is still on the race to be second. Unfortunately, is that you got to prove things out before they take anything on. But then the only way to prove things out is someone's got to go and do it. Right. And for the most part, I think that a lot of that depends on how contractors see things. So, you know, I see a lot of different contractors do a lot of interesting things, you know, by investing in technology, investing in new ways of being, trying to be more efficient on their contracts so that they can improve their bottom line. And I think that the more that the contracting side becomes a little bit more prevalent and doing, you know, having those out of the box thinking momentum, it's really going to disrupt things in the future. Is my belief. You know, like we've had the conversation about project management and how somehow in mining it became acceptable to be over budget and over time all the time. It just became like, oh yeah, well that's normal, which is kind of weird. But you know, we can see that where on the contracting side, they don't have that luxury. You know,
I think that's the point, right? Is a lot of it's by necessity based on what they're forced to deal with. So yeah.
So
Well, that leads me to the question, the two-part question I like to ask all of our guests, which is, where do you want the industry to be in 10 years? And then the second part of that, and you can take it whatever order you want, but where do you think the industry is going to be in 10 years? So where do you want it to be? And then where do you think it'll be?
I mean, as far as what I would like it to be, I think I'm along those lines where I would really like to see it as a I mean, the industry is so multifaceted as it is. Like I've always said now, well, not always, but I've been saying for the past 15 years or so, is that mining, there's a home for everyone in mining, whether you're from technology, whether you're from your chemicals, whether you're from the hard rock, soft rock, whatever it is, there's a space for you in mining. So I think that, if we look at the next 10 years as mining is, if we can make it a much more mainstream industry, where it's less of a taboo industry, where people feel a little bit entitled to get more because it's such a dangerous field, and it's just more like a manufacturing plant, right? Where that's just your work, and there's some dangerous aspects to it, but at the same time, as long as it's well thought out, there's really low risk. I think if we saw a lot more mainstream in mining, it would be really, really nice, because we're going to have to provide resources for way more people. Like even for now, like I joke around where it says, what, we have to work hard to extract all these minerals to build tablets so we can put it back into the mine to put tablets in workers' hands. You know what I mean? It's just cyclical. So we're going to have to provide for a lot more people on this planet. So we have to find a way to make it more mainstream and attractive. And I think that the way that we're going with the net zero emissions and having the space available for people from different industries to come in and shake things up is a good thing. So I think that's where it is in 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm with you. And something that I have the opportunity to speak a lot about, which is, how do you promote it? How do you, the hashtag mining is sexy. How do we get that word out and show people? I totally agree. And it's something that I think collectively we've got to work on together, because it's going to take that collaboration to make it happen.
It's going to take effort. I mean, I talk about it here, like in Sudbury, it's a very, very mining centric city.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, nickel capital of the world. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on here. Never would have anybody thought there'd be a software company out of Sudbury, right? If you were in technology, you were usually leaving. You were leaving home base because there was just no opportunity here. And now we've got technology companies, like, we've got quite a few now. So when you look at the succession plan of a city, what happens when the resources are no longer available for you to mine? Like, what happens with the city? So by having that mindset, now we're creating a whole lot of different opportunities. And I mean, just in my team now, I've got people from all kinds of different sectors, and now they're working on a tool that's going to be introduced in the mines and working with miners and things like that. And they were part of, all kinds of different organizations that couldn't be any further away from mining as it is. So that's what I mean. By having it more mainstream and everybody having a part to play in sustainable mining, that's a really interesting future.
I like it. There's a place for everyone in mining, and it's so true. I'd expand the thought to say that, some of the other skills, like even in the arts, about speaking and presenting and, designing and all of the things that some of the other quote unquote sexy companies provide, all of that exists in our space. And I think that that's often overlooked. So I'm with you, man. I like that. Well, Gus, I really appreciate the conversation, and you never know where these are going to go. So now I know more about bodybuilding than I did before. So that's good. But before we sign off, where can people find out more about you, more about Sophie? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, right on. No, thanks for having me on board. I mean, I like this open format in the conversation, because again, you think you have an idea what the 45 minutes will entail, and it usually ends up being something different. So I love that. Yeah, so if you know, if people want to learn more, Sophie.com is where our product lives. As well as you can hit me up on LinkedIn, Gus Minor, Minor. I'm really active on LinkedIn, so you're guaranteed to have a reply. So hit me up there, and yeah, we'll take it from there.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, Gus.
Thanks, Jason.